What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it was certainly an interesting weekend with some pretty wild headlines getting out there around Sony and some sort of event, Metal Gear Solid remake, and even Scalebound showing up apparently. There's a bunch of stuff to go over and we'll do that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Valve and a massive leak that's hit them and been ongoing over the last week or so. And we'll also be talking about Doug Bowser because it looks like he's on the move to visit Nintendo in Japan, but doesn't actually mean anything. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps that a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Callisto Protocol, specifically the sales for the horror game, as it seemed like they had some pretty high expectations with the publisher behind the game and didn't quite reach those milestones. We can see this posted up over on Eurogamer, where they say, according to Samsung Securities, Krafton expected to shift 5 million copies of the Callisto Protocol, but with just 2 million copies sold thus far, the stockbroker now thinks it will not be easy to hit that milestone. And this sounded a bit out there to me, but apparently this is the case. According to Korean site MK Odyssey, the game cost just over $160 million to make. We've talked about how game budgets have exploded, but even this one shocked me a bit. The game itself didn't get the warmest reception. Clearly, we saw on Metacritic and how people weren't exactly thrilled with sort of the direction when it comes to the focus on the melee combat, but I thought the game was okay. It wasn't incredible or anything there, and maybe that's what they were hoping was something 85 or higher on Metacritic, a lot of word of mouth, and it would shift 5 million copies. That's certainly a high target to hit there for a title that looked, yes, very similar to Dead Space as we built up to it. And yeah, maybe there are a lot of people who said, you know what? I'll just wait for Dead Space Remake that's out next month. Also, while Google Stadia is now winding down, we're looking towards its eventual termination date, it appears that they will be allowing their controller to be used after Google Stadia shuts down. We can see this posted up on Twitter. This from the Stadia account. We've also got Bluetooth news. Next week, we'll be releasing a self-serve tool to enable Bluetooth connections on your Stadia controller. We'll share details here on release. So I will be checking this out, maybe in a YouTube short or something, just seeing how it works exactly with their tool and then syncing it up and trying it out real quick, because the Stadia controller may be the best thing that came out of the entire Stadia experiment, we'll say. It's actually a pretty decent controller, and I think online right now, used eBay, probably $20 to $25, since there are many people just got it for free. They got their stuff refunded. I even got my purchases all refunded as well, including the hardware. So I just have a couple of Stadia controllers that I will update with the Bluetooth tool and have it for use, I assume, at least on PC, but who knows? Maybe it'll work on the Switch or others. So hey, at least out of all of this, got a pretty good controller out of it, just had a bit of a limited release window. Oh, and it does appear we will have some news coming up soon for WWE 2K23, which was inevitable as 2K22 released last March. Well, we're coming up on March of 23, and we can see this posted up from Twitter from Mike Straw, who says 2K is holding an event on January 28th in San Antonio to reveal WWE 2K23. The event will feature hands-on gameplay, an announcement of a new game mode, and more. Apparently, there will be an event here that's going to be embargoed, so we'll get more info as we get into February from that event. This, of course, to coincide with the Royal Rumble that'll be happening there at the end of January. And back on track for their yearly release with the WWE 2K series. I didn't think they would go to a bi-yearly release or something like that. They just had to take some time off to get things situated behind the scenes with developers, since they had a bit of a shakeup there. But based on what I saw with 2K22, I am fairly optimistic for 2K23, so here's hoping they can build on what they did last year. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with PlayStation and how everyone right now is speculating that there will be some sort of event coming up, and people are mostly pointing towards a state of play that could be showing up in the coming weeks and revealing a pretty big title that I feel like we've been talking about with rumors for a while now, and it's still hard to believe because it's Konami, but they just did an entire Silent Hill event, so who knows at this point, maybe they're back in for actually releasing games that will be interesting. So let's take a look at what happened here, because this was posted up over on Insider Gaming, and The headline's kind of funny to read because it seems obvious, but you can see it here where it says PlayStation announced third-party content very soon. So you read that and you go, oh, sure? Yeah, they'll probably release third-party or reveal third-party content at some point, but I think it's more the source behind this that has people taking notice, and this is from the Snitch. This is on their Discord that they have, where they say a reliable source has DM'd me on Twitter to say that PlayStation is about to announce third-party stuff very soon. Now, the Snitch, apparently, I thought they had retired. At least that was an announcement that was made on Insider Gaming, again, from their Discord. But they're back for this, which leads me to believe that, all right, maybe it's a substantial announcement, not just a state of play where they'll have a couple of smaller titles or something here. And wouldn't you know it, Sunday, this popped up. Metal Gear Solid Remake announcement coming in first half of 2023. It's now claimed. That's from Area Hugones. And they're kind of back and forth on how reliable they are. I mean, the Snitch has been correct every single time, but Area's been kind of touch and go there. But we did have Bluepoint kind of tease a mystery project that was in their holiday card, so it does seem like they're prepping some sort of announcement. And I have wondered for a while, as we heard that Bluepoint was working on an original IP, it's possible they could work on two different games, one being a remake, and yes, one being Metal Gear Solid. Now, the other game that Konami seems to be, I guess, outsourcing, licensing out is a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake, and I fully believe that is a thing, by the way, at this point. So that could be part of announcements that are made similar to Silent Hill, where, I mean, would you consider that a Silent Hill blowout? I would. So maybe they have their own event set up, or maybe they're part of an event with Sony for a state of play. But I do believe that Sony will be funding some of these Metal Gear projects, if not completely, alongside of Konami. Which means, yes, at least a couple of these Metal Gear Solid projects that have been rumored to be in the works for a while now will be exclusive to the PlayStation 5. I guess it could also be on PC, but based on what we saw with Final Fantasy 16, where that PC kind of dropped out of the trailer after the first one was shown, and then we have the producers and all this behind it saying, oh no, it's just on PlayStation, so buy PlayStation. I kind of think that's what we're going to see, at least with one of these Metal Gear Solid titles. The biggest thing I'd like to see, though, while the remakes are great, I hope Konami has it figured out to where they can bring back the classic Metal Gear Solid titles as they were with that HD collection and just get it on as many platforms as possible, because I am starting to realize that the younger generation is coming in and they've never experienced Metal Gear Solid at all. And it's hard to blame them because it's not exactly something that's that easily accessible. So hopefully Konami can get that all worked out, at least get those titles pushed out there, and I'd like to see them do 1, 2, and 3 at the bare minimum. We'll see with that. And then on top of those announcements, they're like, hey, we're remaking Metal Gear Solid 1 and we're remaking Metal Gear Solid 3, which kind of leaves 2 out in the cold there. But hey, if those do well and there's good reception, maybe they'll look into that also. But at this time, yeah, a lot of rumors getting thrown around about Metal Gear Solid, but I do think Konami is interested in bringing these titles to current platforms and probably building on that even further. It's more a question of when will they announce it. Apparently, at least according to the Snitch, PlayStation is preparing some big third-party reveals and could actually be Metal Gear Solid. We'll see. Next up, let's talk about the second part of the wild weekend, and let's take a look at this right here. This is posted up over on DualShockers. Platinum Games reportedly working with Xbox to revive Scalebound. I feel like we've been here before with this, at least several times over the last 4 years. Anyway, this is from Xbox Era, and Special Nick recently hosted a new podcast claiming that he has been told Platinum Games and Microsoft are working together to revive Scalebound, but still in very early stages. The source clarifies he doesn't know about the scale of the revival yet. That's clever. But it isn't impossible at the moment. Now, JP Kellums, who had quite a bit of knowledge and experience with everything that went on with Scalebound back when it was in active development and then eventually its cancellation, said once a year, inevitably, some dude with dubious credentials jumps on a podcast claiming Scalebound is being revived. At this point, seriously, shut up about it. It got canceled 6 years ago. If it ever comes back, lovely, but it certainly won't be the same thing. Now, I do agree in the sense that if Scalebound were somehow revived, that it would be different, or at least look different, than how it did years and years ago on the Xbox One. Apparently, there's a lot of talk around multiplayer for it and having multiple dragons on screen, which we saw how that ran with that initial demo on the Xbox. It wasn't great. But Platinum has continued to change and evolve over time, and apparently some of the elements of Scalebound kind of worked their way into Bayonetta 3, as we saw with some of the larger monsters and set pieces and all of that action that went on. But I'd be curious to see if maybe they did come back to the table, what they would have been able to pivot to with the Scalebound name. And also, does that Scalebound name really carry that much interest behind it? It was something I was very curious about, and one of the reasons I ran the poll that I did yesterday, because I feel like there's kind of this legend around the Scalebound name, and that's the biggest thing that carries it. Like, it could come out and it might be a mediocre title, but the fact that it's Scalebound and it actually came back would be a big enough deal for people to at least try it out and see what exactly happened to it compared to, again, years ago on the Xbox One. One thing's for sure, though, if this does happen and it is announced at an E3 event or something with Microsoft, it will get a lot of buzz and there'll be a lot of excitement behind it. But what would Scalebound end up looking like, say, in 2026 or something? That's the real question. Next up, let's talk about Valve and what's shaping up to be their own Giga Leak, which is something that was discussed for Nintendo, where a ton of files from their history were getting just posted up online and leaked out there for all the different systems and their different games and all this. Well, Valve obviously has a long history of games that are still played to this day. For example, we could see this post up over on PC Gamer, who noticed about 61 gigabytes of files were just being dumped online. The games that these mostly center around include Day of Defeat Source, Counter-Strike Source, Portal, Half-Life 2 Episodes 1 and 2, Half-Life 2 Multiplayer, and Team Fortress 2. Now, this is from an account that calls themselves Wanderer Leaker. And in Discord, they said, quote, "I don't care anymore. I also did my toying around with it for a few years, did not upload because I was threatened every time. A real shame. I have no legal binding these files anymore. And I've held on to these files since 2016. Tons of never before seen maps, models, PSTs, VMFs, everything. Once the community finishes digesting this 61 gigabytes, there will be nothing else to talk about. This is the last official TF2 content drop you or I will ever see." And so the community started to dig through the 61 gigabytes of files, and they found a ton of textures, character models, even entire stages that had not been used for these different games. And it does make me wonder if they'll be going back, and because a lot of these games have a very prolific modding scene around it, if they'll be working to use some of these assets and integrate them back in, or even content that was cut. There was talks around Half-Life Episode 3 that may have been in there. So people are still going through a lot of the stuff. Doesn't seem like anything when it comes to, say, a Half-Life 3, right? Of course, that's what comes up. Is there some sort of source code or anything around Half-Life 3? Not quite, as that would obviously be some really big headlines. Hey, Half-Life 3 was found just randomly as it was dumped with all these other games. But it is interesting to see cut content and different concepts and ideas that just didn't make it into the game, but also because there are so many people that mod and do all kinds of expansions and spin-offs of these games, there's a lot of content now that's out there that, while previously unused, maybe could be used now. We'll see what people find as we go along, though. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a picture that was posted up on Twitter that's going to cause quite a bit of speculation in the Nintendo community, because it is from Doug Bowser, and you can see this here, where he says, "Good to see you again," and it's Mario holding up the Welcome to Japan sign. Of course, Doug Bowser is the president of Nintendo of America, apparently visiting Japan, and we can only assume that means visiting Nintendo's headquarters. And the president for Nintendo of America does visit Japan, and Nintendo's Japan headquarters. Generally, we've seen it documented, I don't know, like once a year or so, and it was a little strange over the last couple of years with COVID's lockdowns, travel was difficult, so seeing this pop up online with all of the rumors and talks, and obviously the Switch getting old, but for next-gen hardware being talked about or revealed at some point maybe this year by Nintendo, and this is a clear indication that is happening, and it could be happening at any time because Doug Bowser is in Japan. Well, here's the thing. Yeah, he would probably go there to talk strategy and business at Nintendo's headquarters in Japan, and most likely that will involve their plans for the rest of this year and maybe even into 2024, which would include most likely new hardware or their next-gen plans or things that are coming together right now, concepts in the background, deals with NVIDIA and manufacturers like Samsung for screens. All that stuff, sure, is being discussed, but I don't think I would look at this and say, well, that's it. Next-gen Switch getting announced in the next month or two, or really read too much more into it other than Doug Bowser got on a plane, went to Japan, most likely to discuss business at Nintendo's main headquarters, and that's kind of it. But hey, we'll see what happens this year, and I still believe that Nintendo could allude to or talk about next generation, what they have planned out, even a code name, but I don't really think I would take this as an indication that it's absolutely happening right after this meeting. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, would you be interested if somehow Scalebound made a return? 39% said yes, 16% said no, and then 45% said, what's Scalebound? That's about right. I'm trying to think, I feel like it was 2015 when we saw gameplay for it. I mean, that's almost 8 years ago. And it's wild to think about that. Wow, 8 years ago was 2015, and there are probably a lot of people who just didn't even notice it or pay attention to it until it was maybe canceled, and even then they kind of forgot about it afterwards. So if it got shown again, I still question how much weight that title carries because there was so little of that game actually shared to us. And of course it was canceled and never came out. But maybe just having Microsoft and Platinum work together again would be enough to get people interested in checking out the title and hoping that it doesn't get canceled again. But again, it's rumored, it's in very early stages, so there's still a chance that it never actually gets back to any meaningful development, but hey, maybe we'll find out in 2025 or something. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Steven saying, I wish Ubisoft would look at their existing IP and get some fresh takes on things like Might and Magic, Prince of Persia, Driver, or wait a minute, come up with a new game idea. Well, that's something else right there. A new game idea from Ubisoft. Well, to be fair, they did Riders Republic. That's pretty unique. I checked it out, and it didn't hook me probably like Ubisoft was hoping, because they wanted that to position that sort of as their extreme sports live service game. It was really an evolution of Steep, is what I would say, but it just didn't catch on, and I feel like most people forgot about that game. But Driver would be cool. I'd be okay with that, because was it Driver San Francisco? That was 2010 or 2011, more than a decade, and that game wasn't bad. It was okay, so I would like to see Driver come back, and maybe they can fill in the gaps where we are currently with a bad Saints Row game and a Grand Theft Auto game that comes out once every 3 generations or something. You know what? Driver would be welcome from Ubisoft, so that's what I would like to see them attempt, a reboot at that series, and see what they can come up with there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was the snitch coming out of retirement to tell everyone that Sony's preparing third-party announcements? Do you think this is where Metal Gear Solid Remake finally gets revealed? And then also, what about Scalebound? Will that ever make a return? And then Doug Bowser heading to Japan. Do you think it actually means anything, or is it just more business as usual? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.